Good afternoon. My name is Freya. Welcome to Jared to Jared. On this week's episode, the Jareds will discuss Reconstructing the Village, the history of civilization, the Black Plague, horror stories, and much, much more. Well, my dears, it's time for a listen.
How was your week?
It was okay. It's cool. I mean, at these art classes, I've definitely learned more in like a couple of weeks than I have over the past couple of years.
Really? Wow. You really
Yeah.
like that teacher, huh? Bond with that dude.
Yeah. I mean, he's a good teacher. You know, it's funny because like I feel like with teachers, there's always like the initial thing is like you admire them, you know, because they're so good at what they do, and then you spend more time with them and then start to see them more as people.
Right.
And it's funny because he like brags a lot, you know, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
And he is a talented dude, but like it's funny because he's just like, oh yeah, I painted for like 12 hours yesterday. No big deal. It's not like you have to do that. And, it's just what I do. And it's just like, bro, shut up. Like
John Malkovich over here. Shorts.
yeah, no, he's totally shorts, yeah. And
It's
then
just
in terms of
fine,
his style, like his technical craft is incredible, you know. But
Right.
then, like, I always think of art as like two-sided, where it's like you have technical craft and then you have what are you communicating? And you have
Right.
some artists who communicate very loudly but don't have the craft to back it up. And then you have people who are incredible craftsmen but aren't saying anything at all,
Right. Right.
you know? So his stuff kind of feels like the latter, where it's like this incredible sense of craft and diligence and dedication in the work. But then I look at it and I'm like, who cares? Like, all right, sweet.
Is it
It's like
like
hyper
oil
realist.
painting or what?
Yes, this like hyper realist oil painting, pretty much like portraits, stuff like that.
Mm. So he's trying to be like the old masters, kind of.
No, that's exactly it. That's his whole shtick.
Yeah.
He's like bring back the old masters, the craftsmanship, which is like I respect, and I want
Sure.
I want to take the craftsmanship and then communicate something with it. You know?
Right. I feel like my mom does a good job with that with her art. It's like a mixture of
Yeah,
like old masters technique with some contemporary flair to it, and her like
yeah, because she
background
has a
on neon
voice.
scenes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, both your mom and Dion both have like a voice in their styles and in their painting, which
Right.
is cool. You know?
Super unique too.
Yeah.
Um
What have you been up to?
oh, just fighting with HR and freaking payroll and not getting paid and just it's
Really?
crazy. Yeah, man, academia is the worst. Sometimes, it can be the
Medieval
best.
institution.
Like, I wish I was just like at this point, I just want to go back to just being teacher, like
Yeah,
professor. Like, I love my students and I'm having a great time with them. But
totally.
the whole like administration side, it's hard. And being the Senate president, doing all that stuff and meeting with everybody, having to empathize with everybody's, issues and stuff. And then you're like the messenger. So everybody's kind of trying to strike you down as well. And it's just
Yeah.
like, you know, and then it's just funny culture. Like some are on one side and some are on the other side. I feel like I'm in a Star Wars movie sometimes,
So funny.
freaking Andor, the siege of Andor. But yeah, so
Cool.
that's
Human
about
beings
it.
are funny, man.
Freaking state fair tomorrow, man. I'm so excited.
Oh, in Santa Fe or in Albuquerque?
Albuquerque.
Oh, cool. What are you bringing, Dalton?
Yeah, gonna meet Dion and Henry and Olivia, maybe
Nice. Hell yeah.
Sakara. Go get some turkey legs,
Oh, sick. That'll be fun.
ostrich burger, or something weird like that. Go to the pig race.
Hey, great.
Dion
Yeah.
wants to see the seal jumpers, So
Yeah. Yeah, I went to the state fair last year with the high school kids.
oh, did you? Nice, dude.
Yeah. I had a nice time because I just dipped out. Like all the kids were like riding rides and stuff. So I just like
Cool,
found this
cool.
picnic table in the shade and read the whole time. It was pretty nice.
Nice. You didn't go
Yeah.
check out any exhibits or anything?
I went inside the there's like a wildlife one where they had all the taxidermy, like taxidermy bears and shit. I was like, that's pretty cool.
Right, right. This leads me into one discussion I wanted to have today was like
Mm,
the history of civilization, right? How does the fair and like carnivals fit into that realm? You know,
yeah.
year one. Oh,
Yeah.
another thing I wanted to talk about was I was reading about the Black Plague because you're always talking about the Black Death, you know.
Love the plague, yeah.
Love the plague area. And it's funny that preceded it was the or came after it, I'm not too sure, was the dancing plague. Have you ever heard of that?
Oh God, yeah, the dancing plague's so fucking weird.
So weird. So that happened in like 1518. And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
it's funny. I like have this page here. There's like this, it all started freaking, it all began in July 1518 when a woman named Frau Trofea
Right.
started dancing uncontrollably in the
Crouch for
streets of
Freya.
Strasbourg.
Yeah, bro, and it's crazy because it's like it's not even just like haha, she was dancing for a little bit. It was like demonic and scary because she was
Yeah,
dancing until her feet started bleeding, and then she passed out, woke back up, kept dancing until
right,
her feet were down to the bone, and then she fucking just died in the street,
right,
you know?
right.
Like that was scary,
They
you know?
said at its height it was 400 people were
That-
dealing with this, just like twerking and uncontrollably jerking and dancing in the streets, you know.
With like no music, like
And that
loud.
the government tried to like appease or like help out by like sending like bans
Right. Yeah.
musicians which and like grain booths, which made it way worse and
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
encouraged more people to start dancing.
Yeah.
But like mad people died, like up to like 40 people died from dance exhaustion and just like heart attacks and bleeding to death. That's freaking wild, man.
Yeah. And the thing I was listening to about it, the context in it, it was like, so this wasn't too long after a like black plague
Right.
uh outbreak in that part of the world, right? So like I mean, it was just like there was apparently like peasant revolutions going on, people getting their heads chopped off, like not a good time, you know? So it's like you had like actual plague, people getting their heads chopped off. The upper classes were like taxing the shit out of the peasants. So the peasants were all starving, you know, which is why there were
Right,
these
right.
revolutions. So really
Like the
shitty
end of
times, you know?
feudalism around that time. Yeah.
Yeah. So then you have I think these people were just like the amount of pressure they were under. And then there may have been a ergot in the wheat, which is like I'm gonna mess this up a little bit, but it's like
Right.
the same kind of
That.
chemical that's in LSD. So I think people were just like
Yeah.
kind of freaking out and then also and then also reacting to a really hyper stressful life
Yeah.
situation essentially, you know? So
I
people
guess
just lost it.
one of the most accepted beliefs is that it was from like a group of like depressive psychosis, you know, where times were so shitty back then. People were
Yeah.
so freaking that they were literally going crazy, dancing in the street, freaking till they
Yeah.
died, you know,
Yeah.
of
Literally
exhaustion.
lost their minds.
Yeah, yeah. And plus, you know, the wheat and the grains were completely poisoned and toxic and
Yeah, drinking cow shit in the water and stuff. Like,
boom, cha, boom, boom, cha, boom. I can't stop. It's Saturday Night Fever out there, man.
oh
John
God. Yeah.
Travolta. And then I guess the Pope at that time, that dude was wild, like Clementine the Fifth or some shit.
Clementine.
That he did a palpable against rats, like, you know, a church
Yeah.
freaking gods against rats for bringing the plague upon us, you know, which didn't help. And
Yeah.
then he like retreated to this French city. They walled it off and he like demanded that they clean it and sanitize it every day. And
Yeah.
that became like a safe haven during the plague era.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Yeah. Dude, so much of history is just the have and the have-nots, right?
Right, right,
I mean, even French Revolution, I mean, part of how that started was just like the tax system, essentially. I mean, you had the nobility who had all the wealth, but were paying absolutely nothing, contributing nothing, and just
right,
feeding off, literally feeding off the masses, which
right,
is exactly what's happening now. And I'm kind of convinced if there weren't
right,
cars, if there weren't cars, if our cities were more like conducive to community, we would have had a freaking revolution already. It's like, but we're so separated from one another that's like, how do you organize a revolution,
right. Well, I think that it's going to be easier than ever. I mean,
Yeah, internet.
even look at the microcosm of what happened at the Capitol, completely against it, of
Mm.
course, liberal man over here.
Bro,
But
don't lie. You love that shit. You were all
I
for it.
was there. We were both there. It's fine. Their ability to be able to congregate like that. So I think that if there was like in a true righteous uprising
Yeah.
of a civil war, against all these goddamn rich people and how fucked up our system is, we could possibly get it done, through
Maybe, because I look at like France, how
discourse.
like over
Yeah.
the summer in France, all these people are fucking rioting because they wanted to push the retirement age from like 63 to 65, 2 years.
Right,
And French
right,
people lost it. They were burning down buildings and shit. And then they had, that kid who got killed by police there and then erupted even more, people going crazy. And it's like, I guess we did that in 2020, but it's like, man, the French are wild, you know?
right, right,
And I just wonder why they're, I mean, at least in relationship to work, it's like, like if you upped our retirement age from what, 65 to, I don't know, just upped it to whatever, you could up it to like 75 and we'd all just be like, oh, man, that sucks. And then we would do it.
right, right. I
Like
mean,
what's with the French?
yeah, we've been doing that for years now. I think
Yeah.
it's pretty old. It's like 67 at this point.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm basically dead at that point.
Yeah.
But all empires fall. Think about how long did the Roman Empire last? You
500 years.
From like year zero AD.
Yeah.
That's when they like to 100. They built the Colosseum back then.
Yeah.
Until the end. What would be our America's Colosseum that we built at the like height of? Would it be like a football stadium or something like that?
I guess so, right? I mean, that's a fun thought experiment thinking like, okay, 1,000 years in the future, you're an archaeologist, like walking around North America, finding
Right.
some ruins from our society and stuff. And what's like noteworthy? What do you pick up on? And it's I imagine like the football stadiums and stuff, and like an
Right.
archaeologist would be like, holy shit, these are huge. Like what the hell? And they're in every single city, like every 50 miles, there's one. Like this is crazy,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Exactly. This fucking building can fit 100,000 people. Some
Yeah.
of them, the Coliseums. We even call one of the most famous like college football state, or even the Raider Stadium was called the Coliseum.
Yeah.
It's a direct metaphor for that mark of civilization.
Yeah. Yeah. That the road systems, right? I mean, I remember in like high school textbooks, they talk about like the road systems, one of the gauges of a society's advancement is just its like trade routes and roads.
Right.
Another is like plumbing, I mean, the
Right.
Romans
Right.
they freaking had running water, it's like,
Sure.
yeah,
So let's go back even further. All right. Freaking the
yeah,
beginning of humanity. All right. The monolith. The monolith.
yeah, the
What
space
what would
monster.
be do you think that when we first became conscious, or were we always conscious, right? I would say there was an evolution from other
Yeah, sure.
animals, right? Sure. And we get to this point of consciousness. Was that the only moment of pure conscious that a human beings have ever experienced? Is your first? like the first moment, the first time ever being conscious. Because at that point, really, well, I guess that wouldn't be true either, because social
Yeah.
norms and like, rules to the tribe and stuff are probably already inherent and built upon. So there was a nurturing system, right?
Hmm.
But when we first became conscious of the South, and was that the first and only form of pure conscious?
Hmm. Yeah, I guess depends on who you talk to, right? I mean, well, one way to figure that out is to just like I do think that every single iteration of human being is contained within us, right? Because we quite literally in a very physical genetic way can trace ourselves back to that moment of
Right.
first consciousness, you know? So I wonder, maybe through examining our own experiences and own consciousness, is there something that we can learn about that initial spark of consciousness?
Right. Right.
Can you trace it back down? Can you go through the line of umbilical cords? Like in Ulysses, James Joyce, he talks about he has some line about like he compares the umbilical cord to a telephone cord. It's
Okay.
pretty funny the way he says it, but he's
Right.
James Joyce, weird guy. But he's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I'm just gonna pick up the umbilical cord phone and just like call down to like the first evolution of humanity. And that's kind of what it is, just
I
like,
like that a lot.
you know.
Yeah. I like
So
that.
can we do that? Maybe, can we call back to the ancestors?
Do you think it ever left us? That I think that's one question to ask too is do we experience that same feeling that early human beings, early human consciousness, what they felt? Do we still feel that like during a sunrise or, you know,
Mhm.
during moments of like, when did it happen too? Was it in a moment of violence, right? Some chimp empire war,
Oh yeah.
freaking, and then the little Elijah was like, from,
Right.
freaking, what was that movie we watched? Freaking Elijah, the little monkey, comes to consciousness,
Oh yeah.
you know, and
Malkovich, yeah.
in Malkovich, yeah,
Malkovich.
Malkovich. What, or was it in a moment of love, romanticism? Was it in a moment of family and we were eating in tradition where
Yeah.
everybody was just like feasting on this delicious freaking pig we just caught in the forest? And we're like,
Yeah.
man, holy crap, like, Bob, is that you?
Right. Yeah, I mean, like, well, look, I mean, everything you're saying is moments of expanded consciousness in our experience today, right? I mean, okay, moments of like being deeply in love, like while having sex, deeply in love. I mean, I think there's a level of transcendent consciousness there, right? Or um Terrence McKenna, stoned ape theory, or these guys are taking mushrooms and sparking consciousness, right?
Right,
Or
right,
or a moment of fear where everything's heightened, and then consciousness becomes a survival mechanism, like,
right, right.
oh shit, I'm here, I'm here and I'm in danger, I need to get out of here, right?
Yeah,
Or these moments of great beauty, that I
sure.
think expand consciousness. So were any one of those, the first spark of consciousness? Was it kind of like a collection of those? In the Buddhist tradition, they say suffering becomes the path of awareness. That's not to say we seek out suffering, but it's to say that it's suffering that like wakes you up, because it's like it really is those moments in life when you're like, oh wow, this is pretty bad, that you realize how much you need to make some change and make some serious growth happen, right? when
Sure.
when you're hanging out just totally in a state of like comfort and pleasure, you're more reluctant to grow,
Right.
so yeah, I mean, could it have been like pain and suffering that woke someone up? Yeah, sure,
Sure. And like Freud was saying, it's like I can't remember how Professor Fabro put it in our Hustler episode, but
Yeah.
the object convexes or whatever, right? Where the
Oh
ego
yeah.
is a collection of all of your failures, that build upon each other. And
Hilarious.
but it's not like, oh, this is completely toxic. It's a building of character, right? It can turn you into it can give you strength, courage. It can also, of course, be toxic, whatever it is. It's still the ego. It can drive you, to goodness or to madness, to greatness or to, despair.
Yeah.
Do you think that, so we first get consciousness, right? How do we get from day one to the Mesopotamian first civilization,
Yeah.
into the Egyptian civilization? How do we get from that day one into, is it because once you're aware of moments of love, feelings of despair and pain and gratification and what have you, family, tradition, the more that those compile, it's like the Freud thing, it just builds a collective human ego where we continue to roll with good and love and despair, where we we start building. And the more these moments happen within a civilization, the more of us, right?
Right.
And this goes from both scales, the more love there is within the pack, the more murders there are in the pack. All this stuff is building us all the way to the point of where we are at now, right? With nuclear bombs and freaking America and artificial intelligence. Yeah.
Right. That's really cool. Gosh, a couple of things. Gosh, a couple of things come to mind. One is, yeah, I love those thoughts. Two is, okay, like Jung talks about the collective unconscious, right?
Right.
But yeah, I never thought about like the collective ego. That's interesting. I never really thought about that. And I think of that in maybe less so in this moment right now, but I think of like, Trump's presidency. I mean, that guy really felt like a manifestation of the American ego. Like so that I mean, I think his election really felt like this I mean, the guy was the personification of America and American greed and all of that in so many ways. So I think there's also like not just collective unconscious, but collective ego that's being expressed. And then where does that come from? Like you're saying, what's the I don't know, just accumulation of stuff over the centuries that then contributes to our collective ego right now.
Right. Right.
Yeah, that's really fascinating.
It's funny. I was doing research on Teddy Roosevelt for the new Legends of War
Yeah, I saw
podcast with
that.
Jack Crawford, and like and subscribe. And that all the literature and like, especially back then in articles and headlines and stuff, when he became president, is that's what he was. He was America.
Right.
He defined the generation of what Americans were supposed to be, which was like the gritty, guy that didn't see race or economic standing, collected the Rough Riders. That was, a collection of sports, football players and lawyers and Native Americans and black soldiers and stuff like that. And they went to Cuba and fought the Spanish, and he gave up some of his rank to do so. And, he was Teddy. He was the big freaking Teddy Roosevelt,
Yeah.
And he was that ego manifestation of, this is who we are now as the collective.
America in that era. Yeah.
This is Americans, right? And we see that happening throughout history.
Yeah.
Even looking back through like Viking times, that's what they were predicated on, was a collective ego,
Right.
a collective demonstration of their humanity.
Right. And the leader then it's not so much that the leader is like defining the collective ego as much as they're a manifestation of that collective ego, or both.
Right.
It's like the collective ego just materialized or gets personified in this figure, and then that figure kind of like in turn reifies that culture.
Sure. And then the people that are against the leader, these are the various forms of our consciousness, right? The superego, what we got, the ego.
In Freud, it's the id, the ego, and superego. The id's the basic
ego, the superego, and then was it just two?
No, it's three. It's the
Three,
id,
and the third
ego,
one
and
is
superego.
id, ego, and superego. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the basic animal instinct. I just want to like
Yeah.
eat and fight and have sex and
Right.
sleep and all that. And then ego is, and then this super ego is the that's like the control mechanism. That's like the almost like overly rational
Right.
societal control mechanism. You don't walk outside naked. You don't, do this, don't do that. If you want to survive and be part of the society, you do this and do that.
Right.
People are always apologizing. That's something kind of weird I noticed in our culture. Like I've literally had servers at restaurants come over and like deliver my food and be like, sorry. And I'm like, for what? You just gave me my food.
Right. Right.
Sorry that took so long. I'm like, bro, it's been 6 minutes. It's cool.
Right.
But I don't know. I feel like people are always kind of like apologizing and self-abnegating and trying not to, I don't know, bump into each other, I guess. And that's super ego. That's the like,
Sure.
sorry I exist, I'm not trying to hurt anyone. And then the ego is kind of like the balance between the two, or the synthesis, um, the personality structure.
Which that's a political system embodied, especially
Three
like a
branches,
democratic
yeah,
system. Yeah, the three
totally.
branches. Right. Right. We got like the House, the Senate, and the president,
Yeah,
or you can include
judiciary.
at this point the Supreme Court,
Yeah, yeah,
as
exactly.
it is. So, well,
Yeah.
just figured it out, I guess. So,
Well, yeah, and that's the whole idea, right? This goes back to Plato, with the Republic, where it's like the individual maps onto the society, and the society maps onto the individual. It's all microcosm, macrocosm.
right, right,
Yeah. So that's what's cool in the Republic too, where he's kind of analyzing like different societal systems, and he's saying, like, if you want to know the character of the populace, get to know your own character.
right,
If you want to know your own character, get to know the character of the populace, which I think is true. Like I feel like I gain the most insight on America and Americans when I like introspect very deeply about my own quirks and idiosyncrasies and obsessions and fears and all of that, because they're not coming from nowhere. It's coming from that collective ego manifestation.
right, right.
It's not mine. I don't know who I am. I'm just the collective ego manifestation of America.
And we are as individual, that's what defines individuality too, is what you are within the collective. Which collectives do you pull from?
Yeah.
Are you a comedian? Are you a musician? Are you Hispanic or American, or whatever it
Yeah.
may be? It's a collection of collectives that build an identity,
Yeah,
essentially.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, especially in this country where we're so I mean, there's so many American identities and we are fragmented. There's some unifying factors, like we all like getting shit delivered to us from Amazon. That's like one of our unifying factors.
Right, right.
Other than that, I don't know if there's much that unifies us.
I just had a funny thought too. So we get consciousness and we're pretty proud of it, right? We're probably the most, whatever, top of the food chain species at this point on the planet, killing the planet, wherever we first reformed Ethan Hawke. Uh,
Ethan. Bro, we gotta get Ethan on the pod.
we really do. Ethan, if you're hearing this, we
Yeah,
love
we
you,
need
man.
we need Ethan on
We
the
need
pod.
you. We need you every Friday. Um, how do we then justify that we have true consciousness when we come up through with dance hysterias, killing ourselves
Right.
in the streets? We come up with the idea of ghosts and devils and ancient exorcisms,
Yeah.
from back in the day, and freaking Pele and all this stuff.
Yeah.
We come up with all this social nonsense too between each
Yeah.
other, and we worry about this meaningless bullshit, with the
Sure. Sure.
celebrity culture and all this stuff. The list goes on. So,
Yeah.
is it pure consciousness, or are we, because animals don't believe in ghosts, you wouldn't think so, you know.
Right.
And we're the only idiots running around the planet making up shit that doesn't exist, you know. So perhaps we're the only ones who aren't conscious. We're still insane.
Yeah, and all of these kind of like psychedelic guys from the 90s have all these like grand theories of consciousness. You listen to Terrence McKenna or Alex Gray, the artist, has a good TED talk actually where he talks about this, or like Ken Wilber, like all these like 90s end of history intellectual guys were viewing consciousness as an evolutionary process, right? Where it's like you have like, and I forget what they call it, they all have like different diagrams for it, but like, first consciousness would be like this like infantile consciousness of like unity, right? This kind of Edenic consciousness where you're just kind of like floating in unity like an infant, right? There's not a full differentiation of self and other yet. And then you move up to like kind of like toddler state where you're sort of figuring out your that you are separate from the people around you. This is like Lacan mirror theory. You look in a mirror and for the first
Right.
time you're like, oh shit, that's who I am. And then that develops into full differentiation of self and other, kind of adult consciousness. Somewhere in there, there's also like magical thinking consciousness where you're like using talismans and doing like, I don't know, painting on cave walls and rain dances and stuff. And then these guys were all proposing that like we're gonna eventually get to like transcendent consciousness or something where the collective then sees itself as a collective. It's not just
Right,
the
right,
individualist I versus you. Now it's like the larger we in a fuller sense of consciousness and
right.
a more evolved one. And will that happen? Maybe. I mean, we're a work in process for sure. We're not a work in progress. We're not done. We're not the final state of humanity unless we destroy ourselves, in which case we are. But
Right.
if we're around for another, 10,000 years, we're going to look pretty different.
But even then, we might be the fourth or fifth incantation of humanity that has
Yeah.
destroyed itself before in the past, you know,
Right.
and through
Yeah.
evolution came back yet time and time again. The earth is old as a motherfucker, you know. So
Right.
it's that there's that theory as well.
Yeah.
And societies can completely vanish, you know, through ice ages and
Yeah.
floods and what have you. So
Right. Yeah. Like nonlinear history, we could have evolved past this and then got destroyed and started over. Yeah. One thing, go ahead. I feel like you got something.
I'm just kind of freaking out that nobody, like, we address the alien thing,
Oh God, I know.
extraterrestrial, you know,
Uh,
we're addressing it in society. But Dion brings up a good point. Like, the NASA guy was on the news the other day, and he was like, they asked him, and an interviewer was just like, have you heard of this such and such a person that, you know, he was in charge of like interviewing people that have seen phenomena for like the CIA and shit like that, you know.
yeah.
And the NASA guy was just like, oh yeah, I caught him like flipping through the channels and like, you know, the nightly news. I don't really know. It's like, you're the head of NASA. What are you talking about? Like, it's such, I don't know, you weren't watching the Senate hearings, really? Like, I don't know.
Mm,
I think it's a bunch of bullshit that I genuinely think it's bad. That's why they don't want to tell us. Like, in some way, it's bad.
mm,
And like that shit they told David Fravor, it may not be true, whatever it is, but that we're just vessels for extraterrestrial souls. Like, if that shit was true or something, that would suck, man. I don't know. It may
yeah.
not be that bad as long as I can keep my consciousness and, you know, John Malkovich go live with my alien in his new body. But, you know, but
Um,
what would extraterrestrial, you know, consciousness, a different form, what would that mean for our, you know, growth as the collective? What would it mean for human civilization? Would civilization crumble? Would it expand?
Right. Well, it depends on the angle you're looking at it from. I mean, like, okay, Genesis Peorage, who had, man, all these people in the 90s. I talk about this in the Genesis Peorage episode,
Dude,
Becoming Human, like and subscribe.
the 90s America was like postmodern France. It was brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah, right, right. And it's like the whole like 90s era. Okay, so it was like the last decade in the century. There's this like end of history narrative that like democracy won, and history from here on out is just going to be the like progressional democratization of the rest of the world. Everyone's going to become America, and it's going to be awesome, right?
Right.
um you have all these ideas, you have all like in novels and music and stuff and film, all this like cyberpunk, like everyone's going to become half robots, next evolution of human beings. Like people are so into like the next evolution. But anyway, so Genesis says they refer to the humane species, where it's human with an E at the end, like a with a capital E at the end, the humane species.
Okay.
Um, and then the E
Nice.
is supposed to stand for evolved, empathetic. Um, oh man, I'm forgetting, but a whole bunch of like other experimental, like, all these
Okay.
different
Okay.
E words. And kind of the main idea, I think, was just sort of like getting out of our own getting our heads out of our asses, essentially like realizing the extent to which we are interconnected with everyone around us, that my actions are not isolated, that I'm not an isolated individual, but
Right.
everything I do and every way I behave, when I throw stuff out, it's not just like disappearing, which is what my small ego self thinks. Oh, I threw that in the garbage, it's gone now. Yeah,
Right.
it's
Right.
like, no, that shit goes somewhere.
Yeah.
Mostly into the ocean. Even if I'm throwing it in the garbage in my kitchen, that shit's ending up in the ocean, right? So just like a wider sense of understanding of like where your food's coming from, where it's going, where my personality structure came from, where it's going, the way that, people from my past impacted my growth, and how I'm impacting the growth of younger people today, and just realizing a fuller sense of interconnectedness. And then when you see that interconnectedness, um, so the theory goes, then you start to develop more compassion and understanding and a sense of unity with other human beings, hence humane rather than just human, you know.
Right. Right.
Which is sweet, and I like that, and I hope that we're going that way. I mean, in a lot of ways we are, I think,
Sure.
you
There's
know.
arguments to be made
Yeah,
in both directions,
sure, sure.
absolutely. I want to go back to your thought about the 90s too.
Yeah,
But that whole like Johnny Mnemonic, The
yeah,
Matrix, like, I don't know, just Total Recall was 80s, but was leading into that, whole
totally, yeah.
90s sci-fi culture. It's a
Bro, and
lot of these
even
post-human questions.
yeah, it was very post-human, yeah. And then cut you off for a minute, bro. Even fucking, I watched James Bond, The World Is Not Enough. Pierce Brosnan
Nice, nice.
came out in 99, I think, or like 98 or something like that. And you know how in the James Bond movies, there's always those like in the opening credits, those like I don't know, sequences where it's just like there, I don't know what to call them, just the opening credit scenes where it's these like collages of like hot girls dancing and stuff or whatever.
Sure, the like musical intro. Yeah.
Yeah, the musical intro that are always like really well done, but in this James Bond that came out in the late 90s, it's pure cyberpunk. They were completely ripping off the Matrix. If you watch the opening credits, it's like
Really?
Pierce Brosnan and some chick, and they're all like look like they're at a rave and stuff. It's so weird.
Really crazy.
Yeah, but anyway, the point is
That's
like that.
early John Wick right there.
Yeah, exactly. Like post-human cyberpunk rave that even trickled down as far as, mainstream as fuck James Bond.
Right, right. Listen, listeners, next, and we got to decide, man. We got to watch Johnny Mnemonic for the next. That's gonna blow our minds,
I'm
Johnny
down. I've
Mnemonic.
never seen that. So yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, and even like you've never seen that. Oh man,
Yeah.
that's one of Keanu's best.
Like,
Rollins is in it too.
oh yeah.
But the oh man, I forgot what my point on that was going
Oh
to.
shit. I'm sorry. You're talking about cyber aesthetic. I don't know.
I don't, what was
post-human
that
90s
article?
founding and modern.
What was those articles that Scarlett was having us read about, like the cyber? What did that scholar call it?
Cyborg feminism, Donna
The
Haraway.
cyborg feminism. Yeah,
Yeah, that shit
that's
was
just
so
awesome,
far
man.
out, man.
So far out. I love it though. Like the cyborg, what are we gonna be? I don't know. How
Right,
is
yeah.
I I foresee a scenario where not to go George Orwell on your ass over here,
Oh no.
but I foresee a situation where we are we're finding our collective identity through the development of artificial intelligence. Because what are we trying to do? We're trying to identify ourselves. We're trying to create something that is inherently truly human. And in so doing, in the process, we're doing an extreme deep dive into what makes us who we are. And if there's an artificial intelligence, or if there's a hostile, AI or alien race out there or whatever, it's actually the AI and the artificial intelligence that we could team up with that can help us to potentially win the war. That's all I'm going to say.
Perhaps.
But nonetheless, how do you feel about that thought on finding the collective identity? Because we're trying to build who we are. We're trying to build the human.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, in order to figure out who you are, part of that process is figuring out who you're not.
Right.
Right. That's just any process. Like is and isn't are kind of like two sides of the same coin. Right. So, I mean,
Sure.
if I'm going to really get to know anything, I also need to really get to know what it's not, which is kind of a
Sure.
fun way. And think about how people identify, right? I mean, people identify by what they're not just as much as what they are, I mean, if I'm even if I'm linguistically, even if I'm verbalizing it like this is who I am, that inherent in that statement is this is who I'm not, right? So let's say I'm like,
Right.
I'm liberal. What am I also saying implicit in that statement? I'm not conservative, right? If I
Right.
say I'm white, what am I saying in that? I'm not black, right?
Right.
Or if I'm saying, the opposite, like, oh, I'm not conservative, what am I saying? I'm also saying like I'm a liberal. Put it on my Tinder app, right? Whatever.
Right.
And we're all getting obsessed with identity, and I think social media is part of that. We're more obsessed with identity now than we have been in the past, but like well, maybe not, but I think maybe the stage we're in is figuring out who we're not, right? I mean, if and that's part of the whole like becoming human thing I'm working on is like if we're figuring out who we are as a species, as a collective, as a unity, as our next evolved selves, if we're figuring that out, we also need to figure out the non-human, and kind of go through that process. It's kind of like a teenager who's you know, I remember when I was working with those kids, the teens at the high school, it's like you'd have kids where like 1 week they're goth, and then the next week they're like, that wasn't me. Now I'm, a soccer player or whatever,
Right.
And
Oh,
that's
sure.
cool,
Yeah.
that's
I've been,
great. Those kids
yeah.
are figuring it out, So I think maybe that's the stage we're in right now, where it's like, is artificial intelligence human or non-human? What is it? And how does it relate to us? What are we? Alien species, what is that? Alien consciousness, is that similar to our consciousness? Is it human or non-human? The natural world. We kind of fucked up with that one because we decided that it wasn't human, it wasn't part of us, and now it's being destroyed.
Right.
And we typically destroy things that we don't see as part of our collective,
Sure.
you know.
Even though there is some sort of inherent inclination to empathize towards the non-human in our world as well. I mean, we got two guys right here that are talking about environmentalism, loving
Yeah.
Ethan Hawke, first reformed, about to wrap ourselves in barbed wire.
Ethan,
Ethan,
get on the pod.
So there is that too. But I love that thought though, figuring out what we're not. and me playing around in chat GPT trying to make like fun like classroom activities we could do with it
Right.
is one of the biggest processes is reading through it to identify the non-human tone of voice within the an angle and approach as a robot writer within the script that it gives you, such as repetition, tone, etc. Right? So,
Yeah.
but what it's building is even through this small little avenue of literature, right, and writing and reading, is it's allowing the students to understand how to write essentially and express themselves in a human way, right?
Mm.
Our own writing and our own way of comprehending the things that we want to communicate comes out jumbled and bad. It comes out robotic, almost artificial when we
Right.
and it's confusing. That's why we have to go to school and
Yeah.
learn patterns of speech and learn syntax and grammar and all this stuff, right?
Right.
One of the most important things you got to learn once you're advanced within that is how do you speak with your own voice. That's one of the most important things, is to find your voice as an author. And the only way to do that is to identify what is not human about your writing, essentially, right? And one great way to do that is to get something that isn't human and then be like, how can I make it so? Right.
I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah, that's really cool.
Can
See, and I think
we take 5? I gotta piss and I want to heat up my coffee over here. So
yeah.
That'll give us an intermission.
Oh wait, bro, the a couple episodes ago you used a song from Mario.
Yeah.
The song, it's from the level in Mario 64 where you're like kind of in this like sea cave or something like
Dude,
that.
I was so hoping you'd catch
song,
up
bro.
on that. You'd catch that.
Oh man,
I'm glad you love it. That song. Me too. I was just like, this is like, I wonder if you'll catch it. This is like one of the best memories. Like,
yeah, I remember being like 9 years old playing that, and that song like made me feel stoned or something.
Right,
It's so beautiful, that song. I don't know.
It's so beautiful. And then dude, the crazy thing about nostalgia is no matter how old or unhealthy or aged your body is, your mental like brain can take you back to that age.
Oh, it's crazy. Yeah.
Like when I first like heard that song, I was like, I gotta put this one. I went back to like 12, like eating ramen noodles and Fruity Pebbles in my room, like so happy and healthy, just like playing that game. It's Mario
for real, man.
Or best Mario of all, man. I'm glad we brought intermissions back. I love it. All right.
Oh, so good. Yeah.
Addicted to coffee. Is that one of those ozone oxygen tanks?
What are you talking about?
Sitting next to you.
Oh yeah.
I bought a couple of them. I was like, this isn't doing anything. It's giving me a headache.
Bro, no, they're awesome. It's but it was Ash's parents came up, and then I guess with the altitude and stuff, like her mom's just like getting kind of dizzy or whatever. So
Yeah.
we got those like oxygen tanks. And then my mom came to visit and we're using them the whole time. I'm like, man, you old people are tripping. Like the altitude's not that bad.
But yeah, yeah. I mean, it's pretty severe when you live at, you
Yeah.
know, um, yeah, sea level, but
Yeah. No, when I first moved up to altitude and went for a run, I thought I was having a heart attack.
oh, guaranteed.
Yeah, I almost died.
You could have died.
Could have
We almost
died.
lost you.
Yeah, I ran like a mile and I was like, holy shit, what's happening?
Oh God. A lot of athletes train in New Mexico, runners.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, for the Olympics and shit. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Wasn't that like kind of a tradition in like native communities too? Like
Oh yeah.
running's
There's
pretty big.
oh yeah, there's the whole like Navajo. The Navajo runners are really famous too,
Yeah. It's
dominating
badass.
college sports and stuff.
Well, that
Yeah.
makes sense. It's like those dudes from freaking like Kenya and shit who just like live at altitude and I don't know, in these just like vast open spaces. It's, the environment lends itself to strong runners.
Right, right. So tell me, do you have any good Long Island ghost stories for us
Oh, funny. Yeah, I guess it's getting to be that time of year, huh?
around the campfire?
Um,
It's getting toasty out there.
Long Island ghost stories. Okay, so no personal ones. Yeah, I really don't have any like personal ones,
Sure.
but I have like the local legends,
What
that everyone knows.
mythologies have you heard? Yeah, what are the legends?
Yeah, so this one's pretty cool. I dig this one. So there's Lake Ronkonkoma, Long Island, New York, right?
Okay.
And I never swam in it as a kid because apparently it got fucking toxic because, 20th century, 21st century. So
First
no one ever
reformed. Yeah.
swam in it. Like I never saw it, but it's a beautiful lake. Never saw anyone swim in it though. Until
Hmm.
pretty recently. I think now people are swimming in it again.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, so there's a story during colonial settler times. There's this guy, pretty much John Smith and Pocahontas kind of story. There's this English
Okay.
settler guy and this native woman, and they become lovers, right? And you know, West Side Story kind of thing. It's like, no, that's not okay, right? Romeo and Juliet.
Right.
So they decide to meet out in the middle of Lake Ronkonkoma, middle of the night, right? When the moon hits its highest point, meet me in the middle of the lake, right?
Okay.
So, so John Smith goes out there and somehow, her canoe's sinking or something, right? And she like falls into the lake and just gets fucking sucked down, right? Into the middle of the lake. And he's like, no, right? He's just like
Right.
in the moonlight, middle of the lake, no. So he
Riptide.
dives in after her. And then same thing, just gets just sucked down, never seen again, either of them, right? So the legend goes that they got caught by and there actually is like a I've heard that there's a tunnel going from the bottom of the lake, which is very, very deep, like all the way into the East River or something in New York City. So there's like some sort of like current that could actually suck you down. This is what I've been told.
Crazy.
Yeah, so the legend was that they went out there and and there's various versions. I mean, another version, he's going out there and then, meets her in the middle of the lake and then someone shoots an arrow and fucking hits her in the chest, because they're pissed about their romance, right?
Okay.
Um, but anyway, they die and then now their ghosts, are the ones who suck you down into Lake Ronkonkoma. And apparently, like before it got all toxic, people swim in it, people drown in it like all the time.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So the story
Wild.
goes.
I mean, there's probably a riptide and
Well, yeah.
it pulls you down. Not supposed to swim in those lakes. That's a good one. That's a good one. There's of course the story of La Llorona here in New
Yes. Yeah,
Mexico.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one.
The like screaming mother who drowned her babies in the arroyos.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
You can still hear her crying out for them. Wild.
Hey, hey, one cool theory I've heard about horror movies and sort of ghost storytelling in the US in general is that it's coming from it's an expression of guilt around genocide of natives.
Okay.
Because if you look at, okay, so there's a few examples like Poltergeist. The
Right.
whole premise of Poltergeist is that they built a house on an Indian burial ground,
Right. Right.
right, and then get haunted. Same thing with Pet Cemetery. Like that's a trope in American horror is
That is
the
a trope. Amityville Horror too,
yeah
built on an old, yeah, Native American burial ground, the house.
yeah.
Um, so we used to buy meat from this guy, this rancher, and he lived on one of the reservations out here
Yeah. Do
in
you
New
remember his
Mexico.
name?
Shoot, I don't. Fred something. His first name was Fred. I know that.
Cool.
So Fred we'd get like a half a cow from him every year, my parents, and he would
Sick.
go to our local church. And he has a wild story that he was driving home. He lived in Cochiti, the Cochiti Pueblo, and he's in his old Ford, and he sees something in the distance. And the New Mexico landscape, it's pretty scary, it's
Yeah.
vast, it's
It's
sublime.
gothic. It's a gothic
It's gothic,
landscape.
yeah.
Yeah.
So he looks out at the rolling hills there and cacti, and it's the middle of the night, just got back home from hunting or whatever, and he sees something coming towards him at his truck, and he's like, "What the hell is that? Is that like a coyote or like like a really gigantic freaking coyote or something like that?" So it keeps getting closer, and he notices it's on 2 feet. It's running
Yeah.
like a
Oh
man.
shit.
Yeah, and he said that it turned out to be what he says to be a skinwalker, and it ran alongside of his truck and was looking at him eye to eye,
fuck.
and that he slammed on the gas. And he said at last he looked, he was going like 72 miles an hour, and the guy was still running alongside of his truck.
Oh man, that's so funny.
Wild. Eventually dusted him. Thank God for the Ford, engine.
Scary shit, man. Scary shit.
You never heard stories like that from anybody else, huh?
On Long Island or
Mm-hmm. Because it
let's
just
see.
seems like all humans have like. I oftentimes ask people about like campfire stories, or like, was there ever a moment where you thought you like encountered,
Oh, for me personally.
well, just or like people that old friends of yours or friends of the families. It seems like like not everybody, but a lot of people throughout my life have been like, this one time, man. It's just like, I swear to God, I saw Pele Satanis.
Yeah, no, I mean, I remember having like nightmares as a kid that freaked me out, but they were nightmares. I remember, um,
No, like family, friends, or anything had ghost stories.
no, nothing's coming to mind. God, I feel like if I asked around, there'd have to be some. I'm sure there was because I remember, hanging out with friends as a kid, and someone tells a story like, "Oh yeah, I totally." So my grandpa died like a month ago, and then like last night I saw him in my,
Right,
or
right, right.
whatever. Um,
I think maybe I have a bunch of them because I grew up in a very like conservative Christian culture, and
I could
that
see that. Yeah, yeah.
like collective psychosis,
Right.
hysteria rather, is like shared by a lot of them, and like that's a big topic of like campfire
Yeah.
stories, just like, oh,
Right. Yeah, you like manifest the thing you fear, sort of.
right, exactly.
Mm.
Like I had this one guy
So
tell me about
interesting.
him like going on a trip with a bunch of like brothers to go to a Jehovah's Witness convention,
Yeah.
and he woke up in the middle of the night, and one of the brothers, like they were in a house where all the doors like faced each other, like a four
Yeah.
room, and they woke up to one of the guys screaming bloody murder. And he got up, and all of them ran into the middle of the hallway. They all opened their doors, and he was on the ground, and on top of the dresser, which they had noticed before is like an Airbnb. was a gargoyle apparently, and this
Yeah.
freaking gargoyle was alive, just like
Dude, you know what? And maybe it is like a New Mexico thing or like I don't know, New Mexico thing, native
maybe
thing.
it is the legends, you know.
Yeah, because I remember my friend Morningstar in Albuquerque, she told me a story where like as a little kid, I think it was like her I think it was her dad or stepdad or someone was doing like something in the house where he was essentially like a medicine man and doing like healing
Right.
stuff in the house,
Yeah.
right? So I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
he was having people in, there's just energies going around, whatever, you know.
Right.
And she has a story where the guy essentially exorcised someone, and then Morningstar is like a little girl and sitting in her bedroom and like sees a fucking gargoyle in the corner and like runs out of the room and is like,
Yeah.
"Mom, I saw it," you know. And like she
Yeah.
was in the room and the dad was in the other room. She didn't know what was going on or whatever, you know,
Right. Right.
but saw this gargoyle and then the dad's like now we need to get it out of the house. We got it out of him. Now we need to get it, you know, like crazy, you know.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe it's
God,
like
you
a
know what? You're
cultural
really
thing.
disappointing me. I wish that I thought this was like a collective. Not really, though. I mean, it's kind of cool that I grew up in like the land of
Yeah,
enchantment of like,
right. I mean, New Mexico's a
ancient
magical
medicines and
place.
like, yeah, me and
It's
you
got
have
dark and light magic,
said
you
that
know.
we have like, yeah, that feeling. But I thought that the growing up on the East Coast, you'd be even more filled. Like you'd have been turned into
Yeah.
a Scottish man right now. Like, oh, let me tell you, the ghost of Easttown on New York Island,
No, no. I mean, there's
or like
definitely
people that like have said like some crazy, encounters, just living everyday
yeah.
people living out there.
No, it's a very Halloween like the whole Northeast is very Halloween oriented, you know, because we get
Right?
the autumn with all the oak trees changing leaves and stuff like that, you know.
Yeah. Witches of
Pumpkins, I
Eastwick,
mean,
man.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, Salem witch trial. Like, I mean, the Northeast is very Halloweeny,
Sleepy Hollow.
especially, yeah, Sleepy Hollow, especially New England, you know. So there are stories like, oh, this house from colonial times is haunted, or you know, stuff like
Right,
that.
right.
I've never, oddly enough, because I'm such a, I don't know, like dreamer kind of thinker guy, artist guy, I take mushrooms, whatever, like, but I've never had a ghost encounter or a spirit encounter like
Me
that.
neither. Me and Dion never have either. And
I'm
when we're
down with like past lives,
right.
reincarnation. Oh yeah, I've seen this past life and this, but as far as like ghosts go, never seen a ghost.
Candace says that's why I never see ghosts because of I don't care. And I'd be like had to be down to be like, holy shit, bro.
Yeah, it's like, oh, weird, all right, you
Saw
know.
some people floating in the freaking forest is wild, man.
Right, yeah, I mean, yeah, no, nothing like that, bro. But we should do a Halloween episode. Actually, I was thinking because
Yes.
I'm gonna come down at the end of September, Slumber Pod.
Okay, nice. Yeah.
Have you ever seen The Witch?
Yes, I love that movie.
So fucking scary. We should watch that one and do a
So
late
down.
night October edition Slumber Pod.
I'm so down at the end of September. Okay, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be like September 29th.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, that's perfect. I'm so down, man. We'll kick off the Halloween for everybody early.
Fuck yeah, bro.
Yeah. I'd be more inclined to just like, Dalia was saying on congratulations, which, let's see, man, about an ad. We'll see.
So cool.
That
Yeah.
would be awesome. Yeah. Where are they? Where are the ghosts? If it was more, this was what I was telling Candace. I just feel like if it was real, it would be like on Dateline and like on NBC every Friday, just like
Yeah,
another ghost encounter, freaking Lester Holt.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know. It just seems like it's always like the power of suggestion, just like
Yeah.
I guess it could have been, but it was really late and you were tired and you're really, superstitious. So
Yeah. I mean, I really like the stories of like small children who remember past lives.
hmm.
You know, like there's stories of Emma. She said her nephew, who's kid's probably like 4 or 5 now or something like that. But so when he was like really little, I think like toddler or something like that, 3 years old. I guess he's probably still a toddler, but like 3 years old. Kid was saying, and he's really into music. He just like took to music, right? And he was telling Emma that he misses his music store, right? His music shop. And she's like, "Oh, cool. Yeah, like what tell me about your music shop." And he's like, "Yeah, back in Northern California, my music shop, I had beard like and
It's like that cat meme where he just like slightly squints at him, just like it's so creepy. Yeah.
yeah, and it's like, is that him just playing pretend? Like, yeah, sure. Did he, see something that just sparked that fantasy of him having a music shop in Northern California? Sure, but is that like a really specific thing for a 3-year-old to say? Like, yeah, I
Right.
think so, right?
Are we just vessels for our previous alien lives, and we just
Yeah.
remember that throughout the Oh man. Yeah, yeah. While within the religion, a bunch of wild ones, right? I think I've told you about some of them. Like there's this elder, really respected, like, older dude elder in
Yeah.
Las Vegas, New Mexico. And he was like in Vietnam. And it was his job to go into the foxholes. And he said, he'd never been up until that point that scared in his life because it's dark and you're just shooting at anything that moves. Could be like woman, child, enemy. You have no idea, right?
Yeah.
And they said only like the craziest people would go into the foxholes.
Yeah.
So, anyways, guy comes back to Las Vegas, New Mexico, and meets his wife, whatever, becomes an elder in this church, and this guy starts coming to the meetings to the Kingdom Hall, and he is like part of one of the families when he was younger that would go. And he is just like, brothers, you're the only ones that can help me, blah, blah, blah. Freaking, can you come visit me at my trailer, So this guy calls my grandpa, Ray, who was like a young elder at the time, to go visit this. Yeah. They call it like return visit. So they go visit this guy. And apparently, when they got outside of their cars in their house, that they could hear like monsters screaming inside of his house. And they could see from the windows of his trailer, like chairs flying across the window.
Yeah.
And they both just like started praying out in the parking lot. And that dude wanted to, well, I think my grandpa was the one who was like, well, let's go talk to him. And that guy was freaking out. He said he'd never been so afraid in his life, including Vietnam. And of course, this could have sparked some PTSD for him or something in his older life. But like, I'd like to say my grandpa's a rational man. He was an engineer and everything, but pretty irrational to believe in any religion, I believe, But nonetheless, was it the power of suggestion? What was it? Was it some New Mexico shit,
Yeah.
I don't know.
New Mexico shit for sure, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
some other stories of like these guys calling, like even my dad, as being an elder and just like, Pele visits me every night. Do you want to know his name? And like they want to talk to you. And like this shit's pretty creepy, man.
It's wild. Yeah, it's totally wild. Yeah. I mean, that's what I like about Catholicism. Kind of old world Catholicism does have a
mystical, like
mystic quality that's really bizarre and interesting, Yeah, I mean, even things as small as like praying to Saint Anthony to like help you find something, which is like that's not so over the top or whatever, but it's like, oh, interesting, there's something to that.
Right. They even like associated the plague and the dancing plague to one of the popes,
Right. Yeah.
Or to one of the saints, Saint Vivian or something like that. Saint Vitus.
Right.
Saint Vitus dance.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
yeah, New Mexico is weird though. Let's talk about that for a minute because it's been a while since I've been down there.
It is.
And bro, there's a fucking man. So okay. Few things. One, do you remember that seance we did in the graveyard Thanksgiving?
I do.
Yeah.
Yes, that was great. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel
It
like
only
that's
happened in New Mexico.
yeah, I feel like there's still some stuff resonating from that night. I don't know.
I feel I still visit with those people from time to time in my dream.
Visitation, man. All right, so another thing, like just around New Mexico, there's an energy that I've literally never felt anywhere else that I've
Right,
been.
right, right,
Some places they're like vortex towns, like they do have an energy, and I've been to a few spots that like have this just like density of I don't know what to call it other than energy or feeling or something like
right,
that.
right,
New Mexico has that in spades, right? And in particular, there's this feeling sometimes of like I can feel like the sadness in the land, right? Like I'll be in a spot. I felt this at Chaco Canyon. It felt like the land was just this like screaming abyss or something,
right,
like
right.
shit, some stuff went down here.
Yeah.
And it was weird because at the MAPS conference, I can't remember if I told the story already, but at the MAPS conference, I'm talking to some guy, just chatting, and he's telling me like he works in as a therapist or whatever, or has does like addiction recovery, stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, I recently moved to Denver, lived in New Mexico for a long time. And he tells me that he did some traveling for work in New Mexico. And I go, oh, cool. How'd you like it? And he goes, the most peculiar thing. He goes, sometimes when I was there, I could just feel sadness coming from the land. And I was like, oh shit. So that's not just me, and it was just some random guy, it's not like I have
Crazy.
said anything like that. So it was like, oh, interesting. Okay, so there is something that it's not just me, picking up on something there.
Right, right.
Um,
And there is a tumultuous history, from
yeah.
native to
Oh
native
yeah.
Mexican to Spanish, to American. The way
Yeah.
America took over from the Mexicans was, oh
Oh
my God,
yeah.
horrifying, you
Right.
know.
And it's not just sadness. I mean, there's also parts where it's like you can just feel like I don't know if it's like the curanderas or what, but you can feel like something
Dude,
like,
remember
oh,
what
this is
that
like a
night?
ritualistic space.
Remember that night we like split a tabby and went and for a walk and like went to that park next to my house. And
Yeah,
we were just talking about like the feeling in Santa Fe is like it's old. It's just like
totally. Yeah.
an ancient collective that's there.
Yeah.
And we have cave paintings here that are tens of thousands years
Yeah.
old.
Yeah,
And the
literally.
people in the cave paintings have antennas, going back to our
Yeah.
alien friends, right? So
Right.
who knows how far back,
Yeah.
the civilizations actually and the filling and what goes on here. We were saying too that the filling of Albuquerque is wild. It's more like that Mexican heritage and
Yeah,
like, wild, wild west style.
for sure. Yeah.
But going to like a place like Chimayo, like
Yeah.
Chima, which they say is like that's where the curanderas are. That's like the origin
Totally.
of like
Yeah.
southwestern
Yeah.
mysticism and
Los
witchcraft.
hermanos penitentes, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Um,
Crazy, man.
it's crazy, and the stories that you hear, like my
Yeah, totally.
Dolly's uncle, he grew up in Chimayo, and just his stories go on. It's wild, like, and yeah, just one of my other friends, his dad has a story about his aunts
Yeah.
who were brujas.
Yeah.
They were curanderas, but then you can be either there's various types of curandero or curandera that you can be,
Yeah.
and ways to practice curanderismo. And freaking, that was such an awesome class I took at UNM, by the way. I fucking loved it.
Yeah.
But one of them is the dark side. You can be
Right.
freaking Sith curandera, or curandera.
Curandera.
And,
Yeah. Yeah.
and his parents would leave him and his brothers to get babysat by these crazy freaking aunts of his. And
Right.
they would do wild stuff to them, man. Incantations of one time they were like, I just want to go home. And they were like, well, then start running. You better fucking run home. So they start running, and it's like their feet are stuck in place. Like
Ooh.
they're in like a weird, like, treadmill on the carpet and they can't run away.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
these girls are just like smoking freaking weird herbs and laughing in their face. Yeah.
Right, bro. Yeah.
What a
Yeah.
weird story to even have.
And
You
it's
know?
weird because like stories like that aren't uncommon in New Mexico. I mean, that's what's so bizarre.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's got this very specific flavor to it, right? I mean, like, well, I don't need to tell you, it's your home, but like, Rudolfo Naya, like this just like curandero, Chicano. It's like it's got such like a flavor and a vibe. And you can feel the oldness in it too. You can feel
Right.
the like, I mean, it's the architecture because since Albuquerque in particular is so fucking poor and shit. I mean, there's neighborhoods where like all the houses are still there, it's like from
Right.
they're all like my mom and I were going to see she was staying at the Airbnb owned by a friend of mine from the high school, and he lives in the South Valley, and so we're driving through the South Valley, and my mom was like, she made a comment like, I feel like I'm like driving through my childhood or something because all of the houses were built in like the fucking 30s and 40s and
Sure.
even
Sure.
50s and shit. So it just has like a very, and then there's a lot of people with old cars and stuff, so it just has this like very, very old vibe,
Right.
and then not to mention Chimayo. And where I do my Zen retreats, that's actually 10 minutes away from Santuario.
Oh, geez.
And I did a walking
Yeah.
I walked with Los Hermanos. I did the
Oh,
fucking
nice. Nice. The
yeah,
yeah,
the march or
Santuario,
whatever.
the
Yeah,
March
we
to
walked 10
Santuario.
miles to
Yeah.
Chimayo and went to mass there, and it's old, bro. It feels like living in fucking
And
1600.
listen, man,
So
those
weird.
Penitente brothers, I had a friend who was like, had family members that were in that for hundreds of years.
Right, right. Yeah, they've been
And
around forever.
and she was like, thank you for like understanding, a lot of people like they just ask me really like disrespectful questions and stuff. But the
Okay.
history is actually wild, man. And the
Yeah.
penitentes used to do crazy shit, like wear nail shoes,
Yeah.
and like they would actually like crucify one of the members. They would take him down, wouldn't like kill him, but
Yeah.
nail his ass to a cross for hours. And
Crazy,
like
man.
they still would. I remember when I was a kid, still seeing penitentes whipping themselves.
Yeah.
And that's what
Oh,
they
you
would
actually
do.
saw that?
Oh yeah. And that's
Oh,
what they
wow.
would do in the self-flagellation and
Yeah.
during the plague too.
So that's where it came from. Yeah.
Yeah, right, right. So there's that. But I was also thinking though, every space has a collective horror. And
Definitely.
I feel like I just watched Scorsese's Gangs of New York, one of my most I
Yeah.
love
So
that
good.
movie so
Yeah.
much. Um, it seems to me like the New York area, the East Coast, like Upper East Coast area, that is like a very inherently American horror story,
Yes.
out there. It's an American horror. Like even the Blair Witch Project,
Right.
those like really skinny trees, you don't know
Yeah.
where you're at. There's no ups or
Mhm.
downs. It's
Right.
very suffocating and claustrophobic. And there is like this really weird like Pilgrim, the Witch,
Yeah. Yeah.
European, really old
Definitely.
European, like really frightening out there, like we are
Yeah.
saying,
Yeah. Yeah.
follow all that shit. So
Yeah. You get the colonial settler vibe and history for sure. Um, yeah. Yeah. I mean that vibe is definitely there. And there's still a lot of houses and buildings that are of the colonial era and have that feeling about them.
that would be an interesting study, is to find like and identify like the collective horror of each place.
Yeah, yeah. Each has
Different
its own
places
flavor,
around the
right?
world. Like what's like the Brazilian horror, story.
Ooh, that's probably a weird one. Yeah.
Yeah, the like vibe and essence that's
Right,
there,
right.
or like these like voodoo cultures, because I feel like all of those collective things sort of tap into those weird religions. All
Right.
religions sort of tap into like this,
Yeah.
thing that we've carried, like I said, in our heads that necessarily
Right.
isn't real, or is it? You know,
Yeah, see, and that's like you got me thinking about Long Island because Long Island is, I mean, now it sucks, because now it's, I guess this is so many places in America, but it's like you go and it's just like highways and strip malls and suburbs, and there's like not really much, other than, traffic and stressed out people trying to like afford rent that's out of control, So it's like, I don't know, it's not like I don't find it to be in that sense a particularly pleasant place to like try and live. But I mean, when I'm in spots that are, I mean, you could go find graveyards and shit from colonial era, where people are buried. Fucking this dude fought in the Revolutionary War and was buried here,
right,
like in the middle of the woods or like,
right, right. That's
and
pretty wild. That yeah,
yeah, and it's interesting for sure. And then there's, it's like the North Shore of Long Island, you have the Long Island Sound there. I mean, it used to be a whale harbor. People would go whaling out of Port Jeff, which is close to where I grew up. Like it was a whaling harbor. So you still have some buildings there where they were building ships and stuff like that for these whalers, and these dudes 1700s would fucking launch out into the Long Island Sound, which doesn't have whales anymore. Um, but it used to have whales and dolphins, and these dudes would go out and just fucking harpoon whales and drag them back in and sell the blubber and stuff. Um, so it's kind of crazy, And then there's still the Shinnecock Reservation there, which they have a museum, and every time I try and go to it, it seems to be closed. So hopefully
huh,
one of these days. But yeah, so I mean, there is an interesting history of Walt Whitman. Like he has a poem where so the native name for Long Island was Paumanok, and it meant like the land of the land of tributaries, which had like a few different interpretations. One was that there's like a lot of like river tributaries, Um, idea was that there's more peaceful tribes on Long Island that were dominated by more aggressive tribes in surrounding areas, so had to pay a tax in order to just be left alone. Um, so there, I don't know. There's an interesting history, but Walt Whitman's Paumanok, he talks about it in one of his poems, and it's you can feel like a kind of essence to that place,
right,
um, despite the kind of like hyper corporatized environment that it is now. I mean, you can still tap into this like essence in the island itself. The
right,
island itself was created by a glacier during the ice age. The glacier was moving south and just pushed all of this like rock and sediment, like just dug into like the ocean, essentially, and pushed all this rock and sediment into an island, and that became Long Island. I mean, I guess that's every place has its like fascinating essence and culture that you can tap into and feel.
sure.
But these
Um,
days there's so much cultural erasure and stuff that it's kind of hard
right.
sometimes to feel the essence of a place.
Well, that's the most like that's one of the most powerful scenes is the ending where they're both buried at the top of the hill, gangs in New York, and the
Yeah.
background scenery just grows into eventually, early 2000s New York with the two
Yeah,
towers.
rubber. Oh, and it's crazy. Not far from where the World Trade Center is, there's it was a burial ground for slaves. And now it's like, they have whatever
Right, right,
plaque or small monument or whatever referencing it. But I'm not sure. They might still be there, like the bones and shit, the bodies, like, but it's like crazy. It's just this like enslaved person graveyard
right,
under the concrete in the middle of downtown Manhattan. It's
right.
so there is some like bizarre shit.
Yeah, absolutely. That's horrifying. What they found in
Oh yeah.
Canada too, just like these crazy burial graveyard pits. Uh, not to
Crazy.
mention the fact what happened at 9/11, people still body parts still buried in the rubble and stuff in the concrete,
Crazy, bro. Yeah.
like we're saying, the horror of the collective, right?
Yeah.
And like what that brings on a place. But it's interesting. The East Coast has always interested me, especially in that terms, like Washington Irving stories,
Yeah. Yeah.
and yeah, just sort of like we were saying that, like, I don't know, almost like American European, like
Yeah.
haunting vibes. The Witch really gets into that, you know.
Totally. And what's cool about Manhattan too is Lower Manhattan is more European in its style. Like it's a few more like winding streets and alleyways.
Right.
And then as you move towards Upper Manhattan, it becomes like grid system, all of that.
Sure.
And just because Lower Manhattan in terms of settler times is older, people were settling in Lower Manhattan before they were settling Upper
Right.
Manhattan. So it's and so you can literally see to this day like the history of that in the structure of the city.
Right. Absolutely. And uh New Mexico is the same way too. We have the similar issues, like even on a micro scale with like Santa Fe traditions, uh like Zozobra, right? For
Right.
almost 100 years, Zozobra was just, his bow tie, red tie, whatever. You're burning away the gloom. It was
Yeah.
essentially free to go. It was for the collective, like, healing. And yeah, some white dude created it, whatever. But like, it was a town tradition.
Right.
And now they sell like tiers of tickets, like in order to get close to him, it's like up to like
Yeah.
a few $100. It's just like really like salted it all, the whole thing. And
Yeah.
I didn't even go this year. I didn't even want to go. I was
Bro, and
pretty,
I get so
and
upset.
like
Yeah.
the last year he was dressed as Michael Jackson. This
Right.
year they dressed him as Voldemort, and like it's okay, but like the everything is kind of muddled there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? I mean, when I talk about like, it's like cultural erasure and stuff, I mean, that's it, right? Where it's like you take something that's like organic and just coming from like people in a town doing something cool together, which feels good, and then, just monetizing it, commodifying it, and essentially just fucking ruining it, and that's what I think that's part of why I don't feel so connected with Denver is because it is very at least now maybe I've been told that it was different 10, 20 years ago, but I mean it's a hyper commodified space. It feels like it just feels like super corporate essentially. I don't get a sense of any kind of like I don't feel like that essence from the land or the people here. It's just kind of like a bunch of I don't know. Yeah, it just feels like weird and corporate, and there's not much like cultural depth, I feel like, in Denver. I mean, there's a lot of great artists doing things, but I mean, not that kind of like similar cultural depth as like New Mexico or what I can tap into a little bit in Long Island because I'm from there.
so if like the desert and ancient civilization and the southwestern canyons and the history and the people have created a collective horror stories, right, of skinwalkers and brujas and
Yeah.
very like almost Catholicism esque, sort of
Mhm.
fears, right? Um, what sort of horror stories is a society like New York going to create,
Hmm.
or does the
Escape from New York, bro.
or does like the growth of civilization actually like filter out those sorts of superstitions and stories and experiences
Yeah.
within a people, or is it creating something even more wild, like an
Right.
escape from New York sort of situation?
Yeah. So my first reaction is that it filters it out. I mean, like, I don't know, man. Like maybe I'm just like in a gloomy mood or something, but it's like I think this like cultural erasure thing is so fucked up and so prevalent where it's like I don't know, we live in, Amazon.com. We live in the land of Jeff Bezos. Like there's no like well, I shouldn't say no, but there's less and less and less sort of like organic just storytelling, traditions. Traditions are dying out, right? I mean, that's no secret. Everyone knows it. You can see, like, everyone can see that in their own family histories pretty easily. Traditions are dying out, and we're not really replacing those traditions with new ones. We're just becoming fucking, you know, consumeristic zombies. It sucks. But yeah, and I think that includes the horror space, the gothic space. I think, I don't know, as we become more um as we become more homogenous and lose our traditions and cultures, I think that includes horror story traditions. Or could there be new ones? I mean, like, sure, why not? I don't know. None come to mind. I mean, we have there's incredible horror movies that are coming out. I mean,
American Psycho, yeah.
yeah. So
Um,
I don't know. What do you think about that? Like,
I don't know. That's pretty powerful. That was a pretty
yeah,
powerful statement right there. I like that a lot.
okay.
Um,
But it bums me out. I mean, and
it
that's
does bum me
it's
out
like
too because listen,
the village. Remember we
I'm
talked
not
about the
like
village?
not gonna be able to sleep. I don't really believe in it, but the culture of legends and
Yeah,
experiences and all this mythological shit, it's cool, man. It's like Lord of the
yeah,
Rings, sort of thing. And if, it's kind of sad that commodification
yeah,
and just like big industry and large civilization is responsible for
yeah, dude.
you know
And
and
it's like last
mythological.
night.
Yeah.
Last night I got annoyed because it's like, I've been in a mood, but like it was raining, right? And I wanted to go to the Zen center, do my meditation thing.
Yeah.
And I'm driving and it's raining really hard and there's stupid amounts of traffic, even though it's like 7 p.m. on a weekday night. And like um and I'm stressed and constricted. And then I get there and get out of my car and I was like, damn, dude, I enjoy the rain. Like the rain's beautiful and nice. And when I'm hanging out, you go sit like maybe outside under the awning or something during a rainstorm and it's calming and it's beautiful. Rain
Right.
is so incredible. But because of like the structure of our society and stuff, it's like rain becomes this like stressor, this thing that you're fighting against, this like, oh God, I have to drive in this. There's going to be traffic. Someone's going to get in an accident. They ruined rain. It's like they ruined rain.
You ruined rain.
Or
Yeah.
it's like we think we're free in this country, and it's like, no, we're fucking not, man. Because I want to go like swim at the lake, that's 10 minutes down the road. And it's like, I can't unless I have a fucking sticker on my car that I pay to, the town or whatever. And it's like, bro, it's a lake, it's a natural setting. If I want to jump into the water, and I don't mean that it's probably $5 for the sticker, whatever. It's not a big deal, but it's also like, fuck that, man. Like, it's a natural setting. You can't fucking block me from putting my body in water unless I show you a sticker, you fucking Nazis. It's like,
Well, as like a fisherman too, it's a
right.
frustrating. Most of the Pecos is private land, just a bunch of assholes living on the river. It's like you can't own the river.
Yeah, dude. It's like that's the
What the hell?
fucking
This is
river,
for
bro.
the people, bro.
Yeah.
Like, I still try to fish it. It's interesting. I walked through the monastery out there, um, which you're not necessarily supposed to do, but they don't really care if you're being peaceful.
Yeah.
And throughout the walk near the river, they just have a bunch of these like pictures and sculptures of saints with like little sayings underneath them and like really pretty, like beautiful, like Pecos landscape around them, just hidden
Yeah.
gems in the woods. Pretty interesting.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds
And if
nice.
we were to go ask some dude that lives there at the monastery, dude would be like, "Are you guys kidding me? I just saw Satanis the other day." There's a lot of people that are like, they think that this shit's as real as the car we drive, or the
Yeah.
air that we breathe.
Right.
So I think there is that as well. So
Yeah.
and a place like New York and New Mexico, they're kind of like microcosms of a larger like result of or whatever's being produced by a civilization, so
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. One more thing, and then I actually gotta get going to catch my drawing class. But
yeah, no worries.
freaking oh, so Ashley told me about this documentary on Netflix. We watched a couple episodes together. It's called like Live to 100, The Secret of the Blue Zones. So they
Yeah,
got these like blue zones, they call them, where it's all these researchers found that like there's these small locations where people are living regularly to age 100, and they're living healthy, and they're a healthy 100. It's not like they're, demented in a
yeah,
hospital
right,
bed.
right.
They're living good lives. And
Wow.
yeah, so this guy, he goes, checks them out, and like tries to find out, okay, what are these people doing that's allowing them to live healthy, happy lives for 100 years, right? And I'm starting to find, I've really been thinking about, we had that conversation about the fragmented village and kind of how to put the world back together.
Right,
Um, I've really been thinking about that, and like, and it's cool because this documentary, it's got like, it just shows like, okay, here's what these people are doing that mainstream society as we understand it isn't typically doing. And it's very, very basic stuff. It's these people, they live in a place where, they're not driving everywhere, so they have to walk. you know they're not
right,
even necessarily like working out that much, they're just fucking walking like human beings. um Another one was just like community. It's like they, whether it's like a strong faith-based community, or if they just like, I don't know, live in a town that's more conducive to just like hanging out with, playing chess with your 100-year-old friend who's like a couple doors down. It's like they have a sense of community. That was a big one. Food, they're not eating food that's fucking pumped up with like pesticides and shit like that. They're just eating like more natural, organic foods essentially. So it's all like really, really obvious stuff. But then these people are just like, they're like, yeah, I'm 99 and I feel okay and I'll die soon. But like for right now, I feel pretty good, because I'm just like living an active, healthy life that isn't destroyed by commodity culture, essentially, is the way I'm understanding it.
right.
So, and I think of like, okay, how do we start putting it back together? How do we need to resist, man? How do we put the culture back together? Our horror stories are getting getting erased. How do we put this shit back together?
Right, right,
We, well, we make our own, right? I mean, we like we create new creative traditions or indulge in old ones, right? I mean, one thing I like about these art classes I'm taking, it's all about learning the methods of like the old masters and the Renaissance classical painters and stuff, like taking that tradition and pushing it into the 21st century, right?
sure.
Um, Stuff like that, just, I don't know, finding community, you know, living
Right.
close to friends and family is a big one, stuff like that. That's like happiness isn't that hard to achieve. It's pretty easy. It's just, I think in this day and age, takes a bit more conscious effort and decision making.
And if you think about it, what is the function of a horror story? It's
Mm,
to uh restructure the fractured village, right? You're putting the pieces back together
yeah,
because you have to rely on the village for protection, right? You need the community of something, or something's, you're afraid, and we're humans, and we can't fight this thing that's stronger than us. So we need to band together, be together. And they span from, going let's take it all the way back to the beginning of the pod, year one, right? When the fear was jaguars are hunting us, or packs of wolves are eating our babies and stuff. This is
right,
like the origins of monsters and horror stories.
right,
Was so little humans would learn not to go wander into the jungle alone, because a freaking, tiger's probably gonna eat you, or
yeah.
chimp empire is gonna steal you, or something like that, or a way in which to keep the village together for a collective peace, and that we can rely on each other to fight, you know, the Sarlacc or this whatever it is, right? The Loch Ness monster or something like that. Every culture or tradition essentially had these, so we can stick together. Large civilization and the fractured village right now is tearing us apart. You ruined Rain.
Hey man, well, okay, then here's the new horror. Well, not new because it's been around for a while, but if you look at cyberpunk
Right,
film and literature,
love it. Yeah.
One of the defining features of cyberpunk is the evil corporation that people resist against, right? I mean, you look at Total Recall, you look at Matrix, you look at all these films, right? Where the monster is the financial system, is the corporation, and then you have these people in Zion resisting that. I mean, so I think there's a way in which that's the contemporary horror.
And the horror is very much real when you look at it, right? And it always has been for every society. Let's go back to, the Crusades.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, what was the horror? It was getting possessed by this thing that this stupid, this very influential religion does to us. It exploits the collective, right? So our horror stories are what this company, this religion, organized religion, writes about as being scary, right? So all the horror stories were Exorcist style, Now they've evolved. Who's in charge? The church isn't necessarily the most influential in charge person. It's and in the night before pre-90s, maybe it was the government, right? But now in this tech era, it's these large corporations and these companies. And now we manifest these horror stories, just as you're saying, American Psycho, The Matrix,
American Psycho is a perfect one.
Right. What's gonna be the next one? Aliens.
That's fucking interesting. The horror story as a form of collectivistic resistance, right?
Exactly. A manifestation of essentially protecting the herd.
Yeah.
Restructuring the village.
Restructuring the village in the place that horror plays in that. That's really
Reconstructing the village. Yeah.
Damn. That's
cool. All right, let's end on that. Have a good class, man.
All right, bro. Talk
to you soon. Laters.
On behalf of the Jareds, thank you for listening. Like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. The gentleman will be back next week, and always remember, it's never too late to be who you might have been. Enjoy your weekend.